Jessica never believed in coincidences until the day she saw her mother's photograph hanging on the wall of a billionaire's mansion. It was a crisp autumn evening when she found herself standing outside the sprawling gates of a property she had only ever seen in glossy magazines. The mansion glowed like a palace out of a movie, every window reflecting wealth she could only imagine. Jessica's heart pounded, not from fear, but from an odd, unexplainable pull she felt toward the place. She had come on an invitation, though she barely understood why. The gate opened, revealing a sleek driveway, lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. She stepped out of her modest car, her boots crunching against the gravel, and hesitated. Her instincts screamed that she was about to uncover something she might not be ready for. Inside, the mansion smelled of polished wood and expensive leather. The ceilings were impossibly high, chandeliers dripping with crystal, and yet it wasn't the grandeur that made her stop dead in her tracks. It was the photograph. Her mother, smiling, young, confident, glowing as though she had stepped right out of Jessica's childhood memories. Her mother's eyes in the photograph met Jessica's, and she felt a shock so sharp she stumbled back. "How?" she whispered. A voice interrupted her. Smooth. Calculated. "You like what you see." Jessica turned sharply to find a man standing there, impeccably dressed, with a presence that demanded attention. Not intimidating, controlled, confident, powerful, every inch the man who could own a place like this. Who are you?" Jessica stammered. "I'm Daniel Whitman," he said, as if she should know the name. "And you must be Jessica. Your mother mentioned you once or twice." Jessica's throat tightened. She knows you?" Daniel smiled faintly. "More than you might imagine." Jessica's mind raced. Her mother had passed away years ago. The woman in the photograph. How could she possibly be here? Why would Daniel have her picture? Danielle studied her, amused by the turmoil she couldn't hide. "You're wondering why her picture is here, aren't you?" Jessica swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the marble table beside her. "Yes, why do you have her photo?" "That," Daniel said slowly, "is a story worth telling, but only if you're ready to hear the truth." Jessica hesitated. Her instincts screamed to run, but curiosity, powerful, relentless, kept her rooted. "I'm ready," she said finally. Her voice steadier than she felt, Daniel led her to a smaller room. Walls lined with books, photos, and artifacts from decades past. The air smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. He gestured toward a seat. "Sit. You need to understand what happened. You need to understand your mother's life before she became your mother." Jessica's chest tightened. She didn't like where this was going. Memories of her childhood flashed in her mind. Her mother's quiet strength, the sacrifices she'd made, the long nights when Jessica had been too young to notice the subtle pain her mother hid behind smiles. Daniel started slowly, deliberately, as if measuring every word. "Your mother, she was brilliant, ambitious, fearless, but she crossed the wrong people. People who should never have been crossed. People who left scars, visible and invisible, that she carried for the rest of her life." Jessica leaned forward. "Scars? What do you mean?" Danielle's eyes darkened, and he picked up a small box from the table. "This," he said, opening it to reveal a faded locket. "Where's hers? She gave it to me the night let's just say, the night she disappeared from the life she once knew. She trusted me with this, before she had to vanish." Jessica's hands trembled as she reached for the locket, feeling the cold metal against her skin. Her mind screamed questions, disbelief, anger, fear, and beneath it all, a spark, something that would not let this go. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because," Daniel said slowly, "what happened to her? It wasn't fair, and someone needs to make it right. Someone with the courage, the fire, and the mind to finish what she started." That someone is you. Jessica's heart raced. She had always known she was stubborn, headstrong, unwilling to bow to injustice. But this was bigger than anything she had imagined. Her mother's life, her secrets, her battles, they were now hers to confront. Daniel leaned back, letting the weight of his words settle. You want revenge, don't you, Jessica? She stiffened. Her mind reeled. She had felt anger, yes, over lost opportunities, over childhood struggles, over small injustices she had endured. But revenge? Could she really step into the storm her mother had started? Yes, she said finally. Her voice was low, steady, undeniable. I want to know the truth. And then, I want justice. A smile crept across Daniel's face. Not a cruel smile, but one of approval. Good, that's a start. But justice, Jessica, is never simple. It requires planning, patience, and cunning. You'll need to think 10 steps ahead and trust no one completely. Jessica nodded. The fire inside her ignited. Questions raced through her mind. But one thing was clear. She was ready. Ready to uncover her mother's past. Ready to face the powerful enemies who had haunted her family. Ready to take control. As she left the room, locket clutched in her hand, she felt a shift inside her. She was no longer just Jessica, the ordinary woman who had lived a quiet, uneventful life. She was Jessica, the daughter of a woman who had fought, struggled, and endured. And now, she would finish the fight. The mansion loomed around her as she walked back through its glittering halls. Somewhere within these walls lay secrets, betrayals, and opportunities. Every photo, every artifact whispered stories of power, greed, and deceit. Jessica knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't leave until she uncovered every last one. And when she did, revenge would be hers. Jessica left the mansion feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The locket felt heavier in her pocket than it should have, like it was carrying the weight of decades of secrets. She drove home in silence, her mind racing. Her small apartment suddenly felt suffocating, too ordinary, too safe. Safe wasn't an option anymore. Not after what she had seen. Not after what she now knew about her mother. The first thing she did was pull out her laptop. She typed her mother's full name into search engines, social media, news archives, anything she could find. The results were almost nothing. Almost. A few old newspaper clippings caught her eye. Her mother had been a rising star in the world of high-end interior design. She'd had clients all over the country, some names Jessica recognized now. Influential businessmen, politicians, even a couple of celebrities. But each article hinted at abrupt endings. Projects that vanished without explanation. Rumors of lawsuits, disappearances, and betrayals floated in the margins of her mother's life. Jessica felt a chill. These weren't small-time disputes. These were battles at the highest level. And her mother had fought them alone. Next, she turned to the locket. She had looked at it countless times since leaving the mansion. But now she examined it closely. Inside, etched in delicate script, was a name she didn't recognize. Margot Steele. Underneath, a date. 15 years ago. Jessica frowned. The name meant nothing to her, but the date could be a clue. She wrote it down, determined to find out who Margot Steele was, and why her mother had trusted her with this secret. Over the next few days, Jessica's life transformed. She spent hours tracing her mother's past, making calls, sending emails, piecing together the puzzle. Every lead revealed new layers of deception. Every trail ended with someone powerful, someone untouchable, someone who had kept her mother from thriving. And then came the first breakthrough. Jessica found an old client list, hidden in a forgotten forum. The names matched some of the people Daniel had mentioned in the mansion, the ones her mother had clashed with. One name stood out, Richard Langford, billionaire, real estate mogul, known for ruthless business tactics. Jessica's heart sank. He was one of the most untouchable men in the city. And yet, here he was, connected to her mother's disappearance from the industry. Jessica knew she had to see him. But she wasn't going to walk into his office blindly. She needed a plan, intelligence, leverage. She needed to understand him before he could understand her. She started digging. Background checks, public records, company filings. She treated it like a puzzle, each piece carefully laid out before her. Hours turned into days, days into nights. Coffee became her lifeline. Her apartment, her war room. Sticky notes covered her walls. Connections were drawn, theories mapped, patterns emerging, and then she saw it. A subtle pattern in Langford's business deals. Something no one else seemed to notice. A vulnerability hidden in plain sight. Jessica smiled. The fire inside her roared. She wasn't just following her mother's footsteps. She was stepping ahead of them. Her phone buzzed. It was Daniel. "Have you started?" he asked, his voice calm, almost teasing. "Yes," Jessica said, her tone steady. "I have leads. I know where to start. Langford. There's a pattern in his filings, a weakness. I can exploit it." Daniel chuckled softly. "Good. But remember, Jessica, the higher you climb, the harder they fall. Don't rush. One wrong move, and it could all crumble. Patience is your ally now." "I understand," Jessica said. She hung up, her mind already racing through her next steps. She couldn't waste time. The more she learned, the more she realized just how deep the corruption ran, and how much power she could use against those who had destroyed her mother's life. Her apartment felt electric that night. The locket lay open on the table, glinting under the lamp. Jessica touched it lightly, feeling the connection to her mother, the silent approval from someone who had fought battles she hadn't fully understood. She didn't cry. Not yet. There wasn't time. She had a mission, and the first moves had to be precise. By morning, Jessica had a list. People to contact, documents to obtain, places to investigate, every action carefully planned. She wasn't just seeking revenge. She was building an empire of information, turning knowledge into power. And then, the first unexpected twist arrived. A mysterious envelope slid under her door. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." Jessica's pulse raced. Someone was watching. Someone knew she was close. But the fear she felt was different now. It wasn't paralyzing. It was fuel. She looked at the envelope, then at the locket. Her mother's legacy wasn't just in photos or memories. It was in her resilience. And Jessica wasn't about to be intimidated. She smiled. "Bring it on," she whispered. That day, she set up her first real trap. A seemingly innocent phone call to Langford's assistant, probing for information, testing reactions. Jessica kept her tone casual, polite. She asked questions that sounded harmless, but were designed to reveal cracks in Langford's armor. By the end of the call, she had her first real piece of leverage, a small, seemingly insignificant financial discrepancy buried in a mountain of transactions. But to Jessica, it was gold. Every night she grew more confident. Every lead she uncovered, every document she examined, every call she made, built a web around those who had once controlled her mother's life. And she realized something crucial. Revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about control, intelligence, and timing. Jessica sat back that night, reviewing her notes. Her eyes shone with determination. This was bigger than her, bigger than the locket, bigger than the photograph in Daniel's mansion. This was about reclaiming her mother's life, restoring justice, and proving, most importantly, that Jessica was not someone to be underestimated, and she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Jessica's days and nights blurred together. Her apartment had become a war room, walls covered in notes, charts, and photos. Every lead she found, every small clue she pieced together, brought her closer to understanding who had destroyed her mother's life. and how she could dismantle them in return. Langford was her first target. Jessica studied him relentlessly. Public appearances, interviews, company reports. She absorbed every detail, every nuance of his personality. The more she learned, the more she realized he thrived on arrogance. He underestimated anyone who wasn't in his inner circle. And that arrogance, that was her weapon. Her first move was subtle. She sent a carefully crafted email, anonymous, to a journalist who had covered Langford's business dealings years ago. It hinted at irregularities, small financial oddities that no one had ever scrutinized. Jessica knew the journalist couldn't resist a lead like that. Within hours, the journalist responded, asking for more details. Jessica smiled. The trap was set. Meanwhile, Daniel continued to guide her. "Remember, Jessica," he said during one of their clandestine calls. "Revenge isn't about exposing them all at once. It's about making them crumble slowly, from the inside. Make them think they're in control, until they're not." Jessica nodded, absorbing his words. She had already begun to see patterns in her mother's past dealings that pointed to one thing: betrayal. Trusted associates who had taken advantage of her mother's brilliance. Friends who had pretended loyalty. And at the center of it all, Langford. The next step required patience. She couldn't confront him directly. Not yet. She had to gather proof, collect evidence, and create situations where his mistakes would be undeniable. Her first field move was visiting one of her mother's old clients, a boutique design firm that had worked closely with her mother years ago. Jessica pretended to be a prospective client, asking about high-end design projects. She asked casually about her mother, letting the conversation flow naturally. And then it happened. A casual remark from the receptionist, almost whispered, almost offhand. "You know, after your mom left, Langford swooped in and ruined half the deals she had lined up. It was nasty." Jessica froze, her mind racing. Every detail she had uncovered in her research now made sense. Her mother hadn't just walked away. She had been forced out, sabotaged by the very people she trusted. By evening, Jessica had returned to her apartment with a renewed fire. She pulled out the locket again, tracing the initials inside. Margot Steele. Who was she? Another piece of the puzzle. Another thread to pull. The next morning, Jessica reached out to Margot. An email, carefully worded, professional but curious. "Ms. Steele, I came across your name while researching my mother's past. I believe you might have information that could help me understand what happened to her. I'd appreciate the chance to talk." No response. Not yet. But Jessica wasn't worried. Patience had become her greatest ally. Meanwhile, small signs of movement from her enemies began to surface. The anonymous journalist she contacted had started asking Langford questions. Subtle, probing questions. Jessica monitored every article, every response. She noticed a slight tremor in his usual confident demeanor, a flicker of irritation. That small crack in his armor made her smile. She was learning the most important lesson of all. Power could be toppled, but it required strategy, not brute force. And she was good at strategy. Late one night, Jessica received another envelope slid under her door. This time, it wasn't just a warning. Inside were 2 photographs. One of her standing outside Langford's office building, and another of her apartment window. A shiver ran down her spine. Someone was watching her. Someone close enough to track her movements. But fear no longer controlled her. It sharpened her focus. Jessica tapped into her mother's old network, quietly reconnecting with former colleagues who had been silenced or sidelined. Each conversation revealed another layer of Langford's corruption. Bribes, intimidation, broken contracts. She catalogued it all, carefully, methodically. Every secret was ammunition. By now, she realized that revenge was not just about confronting Langford. It was about dismantling the system that had allowed him and others like him to thrive. Her mother's life had been stolen by a network of lies, and Jessica intended to tear that network apart, one calculated move at a time. One evening, as she reviewed her growing file of evidence, Daniel's voice came over the phone again. Calm, but with an edge. You're progressing well, he said. But remember, Langford isn't the only threat. His associates, the people he relies on, they'll notice if you move too quickly. You must be invisible, yet everywhere. Jessica smiled, her mind already racing. Invisible yet everywhere. That would be her new mantra. She spent the next few days executing small calculated steps. Emails sent anonymously. Financial discrepancies reported. Casual conversations planted to probe for reactions. Each move was like dropping a pebble into a pond. Ripples spread, unseen at first, but inevitable. Then came the breakthrough. One of Langford's closest associates, a man named Martin Keene, responded to a carefully placed hint about irregularities in a recent project. His message, meant to be private, revealed critical information: the extent of Langford's corruption, the hidden financial maneuvers, and most importantly, the people who had been complicit in her mother's downfall. Jessica's pulse raced. Finally, she had the leverage she needed. Not brute force, not confrontation, but information. Power in its purest form. She leaned back, looking at the city lights through her apartment window. Each light represented a life, a story, a connection. And soon, she would use those connections to strike, to take back what had been stolen, to honor her mother's legacy. The fire inside her burned brighter than ever. Revenge was no longer a distant goal. It was imminent. Jessica whispered to herself, almost like a promise, "They'll see me coming, but only when it's too late." And somewhere, in the shadows of the city, eyes were watching her. They didn't yet know that the woman they thought powerless had already started her moves. Jessica sat in her apartment, surrounded by stacks of documents, her laptop glowing with spreadsheets and emails she had meticulously collected over the past weeks. The city outside hummed with its usual chaos. Oblivious to the storm she was quietly orchestrating inside. Langford's network was vast, intricate, and ruthless. But every empire, no matter how grand, had weak points. And Jessica had found a few critical ones. Martin Keene's slip had given her the leverage she needed. Small, but undeniable. A financial irregularity, buried in a mountain of transactions. Overlooked by even the most skilled auditors, she smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. A subtle push in the right direction, and the first domino would fall. Her plan was simple. Expose them from the inside, without ever revealing herself. Langford thrived on control. He believed he was untouchable. That arrogance would be his undoing. Jessica started by reaching out anonymously to a few of Langford's peripheral associates. Carefully worded emails hinted at discoveries, financial discrepancies, shady dealings, and secrets that could ruin reputations. She didn't accuse, she suggested. The fear of exposure was enough to start fractures within the network. Meanwhile, she continued digging into Margot Steele. Slowly, connections emerged. Margot had been an ally of her mother's, a trusted partner who had vanished under mysterious circumstances, likely silenced by the same forces that had toppled her mother's career. Jessica felt a surge of purpose. If she could find Margot, she could complete the puzzle, strengthen her strategy, and deepen her understanding of the network she intended to dismantle. One evening, as she traced Margot's last known movements, Jessica noticed a small clue in an old design contract. Margot had been working under an alias for one of Langford's subsidiaries. A subtle signature, a change in email domains, and a trail that led her to a quiet town just outside the city. Jessica booked a discreet flight. She wasn't rushing. She couldn't afford mistakes. Every move had to be calculated, precise, and untraceable. Arriving in the town, she rented a small room under a false name and began her search. The locals were helpful, but curious, and Jessica had learned the art of blending in. Friendly but cautious, interested but discreet. Eventually she found Margot, working quietly in a small design studio. She was older than Jessica had imagined, worn by years of hidden battles, but her eyes lit up with recognition when Jessica showed the locket. "You found it," Margot whispered, her voice trembling. I thought no one would ever." Jessica handed her the locket. "My mother trusted me with this," she said softly, "and I need to know everything, every detail. I can't do this alone." Margot hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you need to understand, Jessica. What you're about to uncover, it's bigger than Langford, bigger than anyone you've imagined. He has allies, powerful allies, and they don't forgive easily." Jessica's jaw tightened. She had anticipated resistance, danger, and deception. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Over the next few days, Margot revealed the inner workings of Langford's network. Embezzlement schemes, bribery, threats to competitors, and the ruthless methods used to silence anyone who opposed them. Every revelation fueled Jessica's fire. She began formulating a plan, step by step, target by target. The first strike would be small, undeniable, and humiliating enough to send a message. Back in the city, Jessica executed her first move. A carefully leaked tip, anonymous, to a journalist covering Langford's real estate empire. It hinted at the financial irregularities she had discovered. Within hours, a story appeared online, subtle, factual, but enough to spark internal panic. Jessica watched from a distance as chaos began to ripple through Langford's office. Emails flew, meetings were called, and nerves frayed. The cracks were showing. Then came the subtle retaliation. A man in a dark suit appeared near her apartment one evening, lingering too long. A warning, perhaps. But Jessica didn't flinch. She was ready. Every precaution had been taken. She was invisible yet everywhere. She continued her strategy with precision, exposing minor betrayals within Langford's team, sowing distrust between allies, using the media and anonymous tips to apply pressure. Each move was deliberate, careful, and psychological. Jessica wasn't just seeking revenge. She was orchestrating a collapse from within. Daniel called her one night. "I see the ripples. Excellent work, Jessica. But remember, powerful people fight back, often in ways you can't predict. Keep your eyes open." "I understand," Jessica said, her voice steady. "I'm ready for whatever comes next." And it did. The next morning, Jessica received a call from a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was cold, controlled. "We know you're behind the leaks." The caller said, "Stop, or your life will get very complicated." Jessica didn't flinch. She had anticipated this. "I'm not stopping. Not until justice is served." The line went dead. But Jessica didn't panic. Fear had no place here. She had a plan, leverage, and allies. Most importantly, she had the fire of her mother's legacy burning inside her. That night, she reviewed her strategy again. The first domino had fallen. Langford's network was starting to crumble. But only the beginning. She would strike again, more boldly, more visibly. The psychological game was in her favor. The cracks would widen. Jessica looked at the locket one last time before bed. She whispered to herself, "They underestimated me. Soon, they'll regret it." And somewhere in the shadows, eyes were watching, unaware that the woman they thought powerless had already taken control. Jessica woke up that morning with a single thought. The time for subtlety was over. Langford's cracks had widened, but he still believed he controlled the narrative. That arrogance would be his undoing. She reviewed her files again. Every email, transaction record, and witness statement meticulously catalogued. Every associate she had manipulated, every whisper she had planted, had begun to echo through Langford's empire. The time had come to strike directly. Her first move was precise. She arranged a chance meeting with one of Langford's top executives, someone known to have quietly disagreed with his methods, but never dared speak out. She presented carefully curated information about mismanaged projects, subtly implicating Langford. She didn't confront, she suggested, planted the seed of doubt. Within hours, Jessica saw results. The executive began questioning Langford in meetings, challenging his decisions. Minor mistakes that had been ignored now triggered arguments, and whispers started circulating in the office. Langford, for the first time in years, appeared uneasy, but Jessica wasn't done. She had another, bolder move. She leaked a report to a journalist detailing a major financial discrepancy, accompanied by hints that the evidence was backed by insiders. The story went live, carefully worded to avoid legal retaliation, but enough to provoke scrutiny. Langford's public image cracked. His confidence faltered. Investors called meetings. Associates nervously glanced at each other, unsure who had leaked the information. The network Jessica had been systematically dismantling began turning against itself. At the same time, she deepened her connection with Margot Steele. Together, they uncovered emails, proving Langford had deliberately sabotaged Jessica's mother's career. The proof was undeniable. Contracts cancelled, deals stolen, and threats made to silence her. Every revelation fueled Jessica's resolve. One evening, as she was reviewing the documents, a text appeared on her phone. "Stop now, or next time it won't be just your career at risk." Jessica read it, smiled, and responded mentally, "They have no idea what's coming." She realized the psychological aspect of her revenge was even more potent than public exposure. Langford thrived on control, on fear, on appearances. By undermining his network from within and showing him he was vulnerable, she was inflicting a humiliation far greater than any lawsuit could achieve. Her next step was personal. She arranged a discreet, anonymous invitation to a charity gala, a high-profile event where Langford would be present. Using the leverage she had gathered, she manipulated circumstances so that Langford would be publicly embarrassed. A misfiled donation, a subtle revelation of his internal mismanagement, and a carefully timed journalist inquiry created the perfect storm. At the gala, Langford's demeanor cracked. He smiled for cameras, but his confidence wavered. His associates avoided eye contact. Jessica, standing in the crowd disguised with subtle elegance, watched as chaos quietly unfolded. Every whispered accusation, every hesitant glance, every murmur of doubt fed the fire inside her. Daniel's voice came to her mind. Make them crumble from the inside. Invisible, yet everywhere. She realized she had mastered that art. The humiliation was not loud or brash. It was subtle, surgical, and devastating. After the gala, Jessica returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. She had seen the first tangible consequences of her plan. Langford's empire was still intact, but the foundation was cracked. She knew the final moves would be risky, dangerous, but necessary. Late that night, she reviewed the files one last time before executing the final plan. A careful, deliberate sequence that would expose Langford completely, tie him to every act that had destroyed her mother's career, and ensure that justice was served. She leaned back, locket in hand, thinking of her mother's strength, her sacrifices, and the silent battles she had fought. Jessica understood now. Revenge wasn't just about anger. It was about reclaiming power, dignity, and truth. The pieces were falling into place, and when the final move came, Langford would realize too late that the daughter of the woman he had underestimated was a force he could never control. Jessica whispered to herself, steady and resolute, "It ends now." and it ends my way. The next morning, Jessica put the plan into motion. Every email, every contact, every subtle manipulation she had carefully arranged over the past months converged. Evidence of corruption, betrayal, and sabotage began reaching key players, investors, and journalists simultaneously. Langford, blindsided and cornered, struggled to maintain control. Panic spread among his closest allies. Decisions faltered. Mistakes multiplied. And everywhere, whispers of Jessica's meticulous planning, anonymous but undeniable, spread like wildfire. For the first time, Langford felt powerless. The empire he had built on fear, intimidation, and manipulation was unraveling. Not through confrontation, but through the precise, calculated brilliance of someone he had dismissed as ordinary. Jessica watched it unfold from a safe distance. Heart pounding, mind focused, she felt no glee in Langford's downfall, only satisfaction in restoring justice, in honoring her mother's legacy, and proving the truth. Power was not inherited. It was earned, fought for, and when necessary, taken? By the end of the week, the results were undeniable. Langford faced public scrutiny, internal revolt, and the collapse of deals he had relied on for years. His empire had begun to crumble, piece by piece, all orchestrated by a woman who had been underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. Jessica allowed herself a rare moment to breathe. The battle was far from over, but she had won the first war. She had proven to herself and the world that intelligence, patience, and relentless determination could defeat even the most powerful. She held the locket close, whispering, "Mom, we did it. Your fight is mine now, and justice will be served." Jessica woke before dawn, her mind razor sharp. Months of planning, investigation, and manipulation had led to this moment. Langford's empire was cracking, his allies doubting him, and the world beginning to notice the truth. But she wasn't finished. Her final move needed precision. A public event, a high-stakes board meeting that would determine Langford's next major acquisition. A deal that, if successful, would have solidified his power for years. Jessica had ensured that everyone important would be present. Investors, executives, journalists, all waiting for Langford to take the stage. She arrived early, blending into the crowd, calm, collected, her locket tucked beneath her coat. She wasn't here to confront. She was here to orchestrate the final act. As Langford began his presentation, Jessica's plan unfolded seamlessly. Carefully planted documents were revealed to key investors, showing embezzlement, contract sabotage, and misappropriation of funds, all linked to Langford's decisions over the years. Whispers turned into questions. Questions turned into doubts. And doubt spread like wildfire. Langford faltered. His usual confidence cracked. He attempted to regain control, but it was too late. Every move he had made to silence his enemies, to protect his empire, now worked against him. Investors pulled back. Allies turned away. Journalists recorded every moment. Jessica watched, her heart steady, her mind focused. The humiliation was total, but deserved. This was not revenge born from anger. This was justice, delivered with intelligence, strategy, and courage. After the meeting, as Langford retreated to his office, Jessica received a text from Daniel. "The storm is over. You've done your mother proud." She smiled, feeling the weight of the journey lift slightly. Months of careful planning, risk, and determination had led to this moment. Her mother's legacy was honored, her life's work defended, and the people who had wronged her exposed. But Jessica wasn't finished with her personal growth. She reached out to Margot Steele one last time. Together, they began supporting other women who had been exploited or silenced by powerful men like Langford. Jessica realized her revenge had evolved. It wasn't just about her mother. It was about creating a system of empowerment, of protection, of visibility for women who had been overlooked for too long. Over the following weeks, Langford's influence continued to crumble. He attempted to regain control, but every action only reinforced the network Jessica had carefully undermined. The psychological effect of his public humiliation was permanent. The empire he had built on fear and manipulation could never fully recover. Jessica, on the other hand, flourished. She had transformed from a woman seeking answers into a strategist, a leader, and an empowered force of change. Her mother's photograph remained in the locket she wore daily, not as a reminder of loss, but as a symbol of resilience, strength, and justice. One evening, as Jessica stood overlooking the city from her apartment balcony, she reflected on the journeys, every calculated risk, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt had led to this. She had proven that courage, intelligence, and persistence could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Mom, we did it, not just for you, but for all of us. We take back what's ours, and no one will ever underestimate us again." In the distance, the city lights flickered, unaware of the quiet storm that had reshaped power, justice, and legacy. Jessica knew that while the battle had been won, her journey of empowerment had only just begun, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly unstoppable. Jessica uncovered her mother's secret and turned it into a powerful plan for revenge. She faced danger, outsmarted the most powerful people, and proved that courage and intelligence can overcome anyone. If you thought her journey was intense, just wait. There's more to see. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single twist of her story. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if you discovered a secret like this?